The Demon Lord prepares to launch his campaign to conquer the world. To aid him, he summons his 4 demonic generals: Ulmandra the Inferno, Sylphid the Storm, Gnome the Earthen Bastion, and, last but not least, an underpaid Japanese salaryman. Denosuke began his career at the company as an unremarkable salaryman, filled with hope and confidence that he would eventually climb the promotion ladder. However, while Denosuke dedicated himself to working hard for the company, his co-workers focused on currying favor with the boss. As a result, they received the promotions Denosuke had been striving for, realizing that he was wasting his life for a company that clearly didn't care about him. While distracted by his existential dread, he wasn't paying attention to his surroundings and ended up getting run over by Moped Cunt. Denosuke thinks there must have been some kind of mistake, because there's no way the Demon Lord meant to summon a guy like him. The Demon Lord addresses Denosuke by name and informs him that he has been summoned to serve as his new overseas manager. The Demon Lord explains that he has thoroughly reviewed reports detailing Denosuke's relentless efforts, being assigned to his company's overseas branch, mastering the local language, and earning the trust of the locals to successfully establish the business. Based on these accomplishments, the Demon Lord is convinced that Denosuke is the ideal candidate to become one of his 4 elite generals. Denosuke is kind of happy since this is the first time anyone has actually acknowledged all the hard work he's been putting in. However, he's hesitant to accept the position of Demon General because that would technically mean betraying humanity. The Demon Lord mentions that the position comes with full workers' benefits, and suddenly, Denosuke doesn't think joining the Demon Army is such a bad idea anymore. Moreover, the Demon Lord genuinely values workers' rights, so he makes it clear that Denosuke won't be forced to take the job if he's not interested. This approach makes Denosuke feel even more inclined to join. Reflecting on his past, he recalls how poorly he was treated at his previous company, making him doubt whether someone like him is worthy of such an important position, just as he's about to turn down the Demon Lord's offer. The Demon Lord interrupts, declaring that Denosuke shouldn't let the mistreatment he faced at his old workplace determine his self-worth. The Demon Lord reminds Denosuke that his old company was run by obnoxious, selfish managers who only cared about themselves and would never pay attention to all the work he was putting in behind the scenes. The Demon Lord won't make that mistake because he knows how valuable Denosuke is as an employee. Now Denosuke has a choice: go back to his old company and be treated like trash once more, or stay here and help build the Demon Army. Denosuke remains reluctant to accept, but before he can respond, Ulmandra suddenly speaks up, voicing her objection to the idea of a weak human joining the Demon Army. Sylphid and Gnome quickly chime in as well, doubting how someone like Denosuke could possibly be of any use. Acknowledging their skepticism, the Demon Lord decides to put Denosuke through a test to prove to the others just how capable he truly is. Denosuke starts freaking out, trying to explain to the Demon Lord that he has no powers and can't fight. But it's already too late. Ulmandra decides to attack him at full force to see what he's made of. She's heard something about otherworldly humans possessing special powers and tells Denosuke to try and stop her deadly kick. Just as the kick is about to land, the Demon Lord steps in and intercepts it. Ulmandra, confused, asks why he stopped her, but the Demon Lord calmly explains that she didn't let him finish speaking and completely misunderstood the situation. He gestures toward poor Denosuke, who had been so terrified by the ordeal that he fainted from the shock. The others are surprised because Ulmandra wasn't even trying that hard for Denosuke to pass out from an attack like that. It makes it seem like he's just a regular human. The Demon Lord informs them that Denosuke truly is just an ordinary human, which only fuels the others' objections further. They argue that the Demon Army is entirely comprised of monsters, and if a human were to get involved in the ongoing power struggle between the demons and demi-humans, he would be devoured almost immediately. The Demon Lord acknowledges the existing friction among the factions within his army, but he insists that this is precisely why he needs Denosuke and the unique skills he brings to the table. He clarifies that he's not looking for someone with a durable body or immense attack power. Instead, what he values most in Denosuke is his ingenuity and resourcefulness. Just then, Denosuke finally regains consciousness and begins pleading for them to let him go because there's no way he can deal with attacks like the one 𝐂𝐿mañdra just tried to hit him with. The Demon Lord tells him to calm down and explains that he won't be expected to fight, but he does intend to give Denosuke a fitting exam. He explains that the demon army is currently trying to create a pact with the surrounding tribes. So far, they've managed to reach agreements with the salamanders and werewolves, but negotiations with the Minotaur tribe have been quite difficult. Denosuke's test will be to do whatever it takes to form a pact with the Minotaur tribe. With Denosuke's exceptional negotiation skills, the Demon Lord believes it should be straightforward to earn the trust of the Minotaurs and strike a peaceful agreement. Denosuke, however, fails to see anything simple about trying to negotiate with Minotaurs. Despite his doubts, the Demon Lord is confident in his abilities and encourages Denosuke to consult 𝐂𝐿mañdra if he has any questions. Afterwards, 𝐂𝐿mañdra leads Denosuke down the hall so he can begin negotiating with the Minotaurs. She thinks this is a huge waste of time since there's no way a human like Denosuke can negotiate with Minotaurs. Denosuke also thinks she's right about him being useless, but the Demon Lord seemed so sincere when he talked about how much he needed Denosuke. All Denosuke has ever wanted is to have his hard work recognized, so he wants to live up to the Demon Lord's expectations as much as he can. At that moment, 𝐂𝐿mañdra informs Denosuke that they've arrived at the meeting room where the Minotaur tribe's chief is waiting. Denosuke is taken aback by the enormous size of the room, but 𝐂𝐿mañdra explains that it's only natural since Minotaurs are such large creatures. As a word of caution, she warns him that Minotaurs are notoriously ferocious, and if he isn't careful, he might find himself trampled to death. As 𝐂𝐿mañdra opens the door, Denosuke has no idea what to expect from the Minotaur chief, but he intends to do his best to negotiate no matter what. However, once he actually sees the Minotaur chief, he freaks out. There's no way he could negotiate with someone like Tereus without instantly dying. 𝐂𝐿mañdra feels bad for him, so she offers to help with the negotiations, and Denosuke is really thankful for the help. But then he sees 𝐂𝐿mañdra start arguing with Tereus, and he gets the feeling that negotiations aren't going so well. 𝐂𝐿mañdra can't comprehend why Tereus is dissatisfied with everything they've offered him. Tereus claims that she doesn't understand what he's trying to say, and as a result, no progress is made on the pact. Frustrated, 𝐂𝐿mañdra leaves the meeting room. She struggles to understand why Tereus is now so resistant to the agreement, especially since he was initially open to the idea. Just as they were about to finalize the deal, he suddenly started shouting blah blah repeatedly, despite returning several times to see if he might change his mind. All Tereus ever says is blah, leaving 𝐂𝐿mañdra completely unable to figure out what he wants. 𝐂𝐿mañdra can't possibly see a resolution, so she's going to leave the rest for Denosuke to figure out. Although she fully expects him to fail miserably, Denosuke starts having a full-on panic attack because he thinks there's no way to get around this mess. As he's walking through the halls trying to figure out what to do, he spots a bar sign and decides to head in to clear his head. The bartender hands him a warm towel to help him relax, and Denosuke orders a drink as he takes a seat to gather his thoughts. He wants to focus on the negotiations, but he feels stuck since there's little he can do if the client outright refuses to negotiate. However, as he reflects, Denosuke begins to suspect that Tereus might not actually be rejecting the negotiations entirely. He recalls a similar experience from his past, where a client kept saying no, but by carefully reading the client's eyes, he was able to discern their true intentions, ultimately leading to a successful agreement for both parties. Now Denosuke knows what he needs to do. He finishes his drink and heads outside to do what businessmen do, negotiate. Meanwhile, 𝐂𝐿mañdra is back in the Demon Lord's throne room giving a report about her conversation with Tereus. It didn't lead to any meaningful breakthrough, so she doesn't think Denosuke will be able to achieve anything either, especially since he just arrived in this world today. The Demon Lord, however, still believes in Denosuke and urges 𝐂𝐿mañdra to wait and see what he's capable of achieving. Though 𝐂𝐿mañdra doesn't understand what the Demon Lord sees in Denosuke, she decides to check on him to ensure he's doing all right. When she finds him, he's busy stuffing several bags full of hay. Curious, she asks what he's up to, and Denosuke explains that he's preparing to have a proper conversation with Tereus. She tries to tell him that it's pointless since Terius isn't willing to negotiate, but Denosuke still thinks there's a chance. He just needs to look Terius in the eyes and convey his emotions properly so the two of them can understand each other. 𝐂𝐸𝐿𝐵𝐷ra observes that Denosuke seems much more confident than before, and this time, he enters the meeting room to speak with Terius without a trace of fear. The next morning, 𝐂𝐸𝐿𝐵𝐷ra goes to the meeting room to check if Denosuke has survived the night. However, when she peers inside, she's met with the sight of a room filled with hay, but neither Denosuke nor Terius is anywhere to be found. At first, she thinks the negotiations must have failed, leading to a massive fight, but just then, Denosuke comes in and tells her everything is fine. In that case, she wants to know why there's hay all over their sacred demon castle, and more importantly, she asks where Terius went. Denosuke tells her that Terius is currently finalizing the pact agreement with the Demon Lord. 𝐂𝐸𝐿𝐵𝐷ra is stunned that Denosuke managed to secure Terius's agreement in just one night. Denosuke explains that all he did was take the time to understand Terius better, which made the negotiation process surprisingly simple. 𝐂𝐸𝐿𝐵𝐷ra had assumed Terius was refusing to negotiate because he kept shouting blah repeatedly. However, as it turns out, Terius actually believed the negotiations were progressing smoothly all along. Denosuke had experienced something like this before with an international client. The client in question was really enthusiastic about saying no to him. So Denosuke thought the negotiation was going to end in failure. But to his surprise, the man then reached out for a handshake, and he realized it was all a misunderstanding. The same thing applied to Terius. Denosuke took some time to research Minotaur culture and discovered that Minotaurs always bring hay with them to use as bedding whenever they visit someone else's home. It turned out that Terius had been trying to request his hay all along. Once Denosuke realized this, the negotiation proceeded without any further issues. Now, 𝐂𝐸𝐿𝐵𝐷ra realizes that she had misunderstood Terius and left him in that room to sleep on the cold floor, so she feels really bad. But Terius tells her it's alright since it was an honest mistake, and he shakes her hand to show that there are no hard feelings. As Terius departs, the Demon Lord approaches Denosuke and 𝐂𝐸𝐿𝐵𝐷ra. He asks 𝐂𝐸𝐿𝐵𝐷ra if she now understands why he's so eager to have Denosuke join their ranks. 𝐂𝐸𝐸𝐷ra concedes that Denosuke truly has remarkable skill when it comes to negotiations, having successfully passed the Demon Lord's test. Denosuke is officially appointed as one of the Demon Lord's 4 generals. To mark this new position, the Demon Lord places a bracelet on Denosuke's arm as a symbol of his authority. As a gesture of her newfound respect for Denosuke, 𝐂𝐸𝐿𝐵𝐷ra formally introduces herself and expresses her eagerness to work alongside him as a new friend. Denosuke is gradually finding his footing as one of the demon generals. It's a relief that he now has his own office and a boss who seems supportive, but it's clear this new environment will take some time to adjust to. Now that his position as one of the demon generals is official, Denosuke decides it's only right to formally introduce himself to the others. With that in mind, he makes his way to Sylphid's room and gives a knock at the door. To his surprise, it's a girl who answers and asks him what he wants. Denosuke explains that he's here to introduce himself to Sylphid. However, the girl responds curtly, informing him that she's Sylphid's assistant and that Sylphid is a very busy man, so she can't allow Denosuke to bother him. Denosuke is disappointed, but knew he was bound to face some pushback from the other demon generals. He decides to just come back later to try again. However, before he could leave, 𝐂𝐸𝐿𝐵𝐷ra comes running up to him because she has something important to say. The Demon Lord has another assignment for Denosuke. So, Denosuke goes to meet with him immediately and is informed of an agreement he is working on for the demon army to grow in strength. He needs the support of all the surrounding demi-human nations, and among all those nations, the ogre tribe is particularly influential. Their military strength rivals that of the demon army, making them a potential threat to the demon empire if they were to turn hostile. For this reason, the Demon Lord is aiming to hold merger negotiations with them to unite their forces. However, the ogres are famously difficult to bargain with, and so far, no agreements have been made. Even so, with Denosuke handling the matter, the Demon Lord is confident that an agreement can be reached, which is why he's granting Denosuke full authority over the negotiations. While Denosuke is grateful for the Demon Lord's trust in him, he can't ignore the very real danger of potentially losing his life to the ogres if he goes alone. 𝐂𝐨𝐻𝐷 volunteers to escort him to the ogre tribe. However, before that, 𝐷𝐸𝐠𝐾 says he wants to go meet with gnome since she's in charge of the demi-human division of the demon army, and she might have some valuable information about the ogres. 𝐂𝐨𝐷 thinks 𝐷𝐸𝐿𝐼 is right, but absolutely refuses to go anywhere near gnome because she has beef with her. So, instead, she says she'll go check on the carriages while 𝐷𝐸𝐿𝐼 talks with gnome. 𝐷𝐸𝐿𝐼 makes his way to the training grounds, where gnome is conducting her daily training session. He is thoroughly impressed by what he observes. Not only are gnome's soldiers highly skilled in combat, but she also excels at keeping their morale exceptionally high. After the training concludes, gnome turns her attention to 𝐷𝐸𝐿𝐼 and inquires about the reason for his visit. 𝐷𝐸𝐿𝐼 explains that he is there to ask if she has any information about the ogre tribe. Gnome admits she doesn't know much, but mentions that their leader, 𝐂𝐸𝐿, is infamous for being incredibly difficult to engage in conversation. She warns 𝐷𝐸𝐿𝐼 that negotiating with him will be a significant challenge. Unfortunately, she explains, there's little she can do to assist in this matter. Besides, she has no interest in collaborating with 𝐂𝐨𝐷 under any circumstances, so she firmly asks 𝐷𝐸𝐿𝐼 to take her away from there. 𝐷𝐸𝐿𝐼 didn't even realize 𝐂𝐨𝐷 had been standing behind him, so he asks her why she's here and why she's so angry. 𝐂𝐨𝐷 says she already finished checking the carriages, so she came to get 𝐷𝐸𝐿𝐼 since she was worried about him, but she can't contain herself after seeing gnome. The two start arguing, and 𝐷𝐸𝐿𝐼 is starting to get worried about how much 𝐂𝐨𝐷 and gnome hate each other. 𝐷𝐸𝐿𝐼 and 𝐂𝐨𝐷 finally reach the ogre castle, but before they can go inside, they are halted at the gate and informed that they must wait for Chief's permission to enter. 𝐂𝐨𝐷 finds it absurd that they are being left outside for so long. But 𝐷𝐸𝐿𝐼, having encountered this tactic before, realizes that 𝐂𝐸𝐿 is deliberately using the delay to unsettle them and weaken their ability to negotiate effectively. He knows it's crucial for them to remain composed. However, 𝐂𝐨𝐷 is barely managing to contain her growing fury and seems ready to lose her temper. Thankfully, before she can act out, 𝐂𝐸𝐿's assistant comes out and tells the two that they may now enter. As they walk in, 𝐷𝐸𝐿𝐼 notices how scruffy ogre's armor looks. Eventually, they make it to 𝐂𝐸𝐿's throne room and come face to face with 𝐂𝐸𝐿 himself. But when 𝐂𝐨𝐷 tries to start the negotiations, he tells her to shut up. He doesn't care why they are here, because he's never going to listen to what they have to say unless, of course, they came to surrender to him, in which case he might hear them out, but only if they agree to kill their chief, the Demon Lord. 𝐂𝐨𝐷 can hardly believe the sheer absurdity of what just came out of 𝐂𝐸𝐿's mouth, and she's seconds away from losing it completely. However, 𝐷𝐸𝐿𝐼 quickly grabs her hand, urging her to stay calm, reminding her that a violent reaction is precisely what 𝐂𝐸𝐿 is trying to provoke. Turning to 𝐂𝐸𝐿, 𝐷𝐸𝐿𝐼 speaks in his most composed and professional tone, stating that he and 𝐂𝐨𝐷 are stepping outside for a quick discussion. Once they're outside, 𝐂𝐨𝐷 unleashes her fury, ranting about 𝐂𝐸𝐿's audacity and cursing his very existence for daring to say such a thing. She's absolutely ready to march back in and rip him apart, but 𝐷𝐸𝐿𝐼 manages to steady her, reiterating that reacting to 𝐂𝐸𝐿's provocation is playing right into his hands. He is intentionally saying things to get them angry in hopes that they cause a scene so negotiations break down. That way, he can avoid directly rejecting the negotiation and blame its failure on the two of them. Now that she knows what 𝐂𝐸𝐿 was trying to do, 𝐂𝐨𝐷 decides to calm herself down, but she's still really frustrated by the fact that 𝐂𝐸𝐿 insulted the Demon Lord. To be honest, 𝐷𝐸𝐿𝐼 is just as angry, but acting on that anger would only hurt their chances of success here, so they have to be careful about how they respond. That said, 𝐂𝐸𝐿 has no intention of negotiating, leaving them with few options at this stage. At that moment, the girl they encountered earlier appears and introduces herself as Alulu, 𝐂𝐸𝐿's daughter. Acknowledging that her timing might seem impolite, she hesitantly makes a request. She asks for 𝐷𝐸𝐿𝐼's and 𝐂𝐨𝐷's assistance in handling her father. Alulu then guides them to a vacant room, explaining that it serves as the food cellar, and as they can plainly see, it's completely empty. The ogres are known for their strength and influence among the demi-humans, but recently they've run into financial trouble, and it has gotten so bad that a lot of their people are struggling to find food to eat. 𝐷𝐸𝐿𝐼 assumes something like this was going on because when they came in, He saw the terrible state of the ogre's equipment along with the cold and empty feeling he got from the castle itself. This kind of situation usually occurs when large companies begin to decline. They make it seem like everything's going well, but on the inside, they are constantly on the brink of bankruptcy. That's exactly what's going on with the ogre tribe, and 𝐂𝐿𝐿 believes that the only way to rebuild it is to rely on the demon army's help. Her father, however, refuses to listen to her, and to make matters worse, he's currently ill. They've been trying to keep his condition a secret, which is why they had 𝐂𝐿𝐼𝐿 and 𝐷𝐻𝐼𝐿 wait outside earlier while they prepared him for the meeting. But his health is steadily deteriorating. 𝐂𝐸𝐿 doesn't have much time left, and if he were to die under the current circumstances, it would spell disaster for their tribe. Desperate, she begs 𝐷𝐻𝐼𝐿 for his help. While 𝐷𝐻𝐼𝐿 acknowledges her concerns, he also reprimands her for divulging such critical information. As the chief's daughter, she needs to exercise greater caution when deciding who to trust. 𝐂𝐿𝐿 can tell that 𝐷𝐻𝐼𝐿 is a good person. She's pretty confident in her ability to discern the nature of people, which is why she told him about the situation. Now, she asks 𝐷𝐻𝐼𝐿 to help her save the ogre tribe by marrying her. After hearing this, 𝐷𝐻𝐼𝐿 freaks out. 𝐷𝐻𝐼𝐿 finds himself in his office, grappling with the predicament he's in. 𝐂𝐸𝐿 refuses to negotiate, and 𝐂𝐿𝐿 is determined to marry him. Failing his second mission for the Demon Lord is not an option, so he decides to retreat to the bar in his mind to clear his thoughts. This time, however, 𝐷𝐻𝐼𝐿 isn't alone. His imaginary version of 𝐂𝐿𝐼𝐿 is seated at the table next to him, engaged in a lively debate with the bartender over which is cooler, gorillas or lions. Realistically, a gorilla could wipe the floor with a lion any day, but 𝐂𝐿𝐼𝐿 argues that lions are cooler because a group of them is called a pride. The moment 𝐷𝐻𝐼𝐿 hears this, he snaps out of his trance, and suddenly, he has a brilliant and foolproof plan to tackle the situation. The first thing the next morning, 𝐷𝐻𝐼𝐿 calls 𝐂𝐿𝐼𝐿 outside. He apologizes for waking her up so early, but explains that he needs her help for a new negotiation plan. For 𝐷𝐻𝐼𝐿's plan to work, they need to go somewhere else first. If all goes well, 𝐂𝐸𝐿 will be the one begging for a negotiation meeting. 1 week later, 𝐷𝐻𝐼𝐿 and 𝐂𝐿𝐼𝐿 are called into the chief's throne room, just as 𝐷𝐻𝐼𝐿 had planned, and 𝐂𝐸𝐿 looks pretty mad. 𝐂𝐸𝐿 has just learned that all the neighboring tribes have allied with the demon army over the past week, and he demands an explanation. A week earlier, 𝐷𝐻𝐼𝐿 had shared his strategy with 𝐂𝐿𝐼𝐿. Rather than focusing on convincing 𝐂𝐸𝐿, they would first recruit the smaller tribes. It wouldn't be too difficult since, like 𝐂𝐸𝐿's tribe, the other tribes were also grappling with food shortages, making them susceptible to the promise of support. While 𝐂𝐿𝐼𝐿 grasped the logic behind 𝐷𝐻𝐼𝐿's plan, she hadn't anticipated it would succeed so effectively. By forcing 𝐂𝐸𝐿 into negotiations, 𝐷𝐻𝐼𝐿's strategy mirrored what he used to do when selling products back on Earth. If he tried to approach a big company directly, he would usually be rejected. Instead, he would market to smaller companies first, and eventually, the big company would be forced to contact him to avoid being left behind. Similarly, if all the surrounding demi-humans joined the demon army, the prideful chief wouldn't let that go unanswered. For the moment, 𝐷𝐻𝐼𝐿 feigns ignorance, claiming he merely proposed an alliance with the smaller groups to help them survive by gaining the demon army's support. This explanation only fuels 𝐂𝐸𝐿's anger further, as he never authorized any negotiations. Everything is unfolding perfectly, though, because with 𝐂𝐸𝐿 now visibly agitated, he becomes far more vulnerable to 𝐷𝐻𝐼𝐿's negotiation techniques. 𝐷𝐻𝐼𝐿 then calmly reveals that these alliances weren't orchestrated by him alone, he had 𝐂𝐿𝐿's assistance. 𝐂𝐸𝐿 can't believe that his own daughter would betray him like this, but she tells him it was necessary for the sake of their ogre tribe. The only way out of their current situation is to rely on the demon army's aid. As much as he may not want to admit it, times have changed. He's grown old and is currently sick, so they need to join the demon army to survive. Just then, 𝐷𝐻𝐼𝐿 chimes in and offers an alternative to 𝐂𝐸𝐿. Instead of joining the demon army, they could form an equal partnership. Truthfully, 𝐷𝐻𝐼𝐿 is making this up. He hasn't altered a single detail of the agreement. However, by presenting it as an equal partnership, it appeals to the pride of the ogre chief, making him far more likely to consider it. As anticipated, 𝐂𝐲𝐲𝐫𝐢 doesn't appear entirely against the idea, but requests some time to mull it over. A couple of days later, 𝐂𝐨𝐻𝐿𝐚𝐴ndra comes running into Denosk's office to share the good news. She tells Denosk that 𝐂𝐲𝐲𝐫𝐢 has agreed to the alliance with the demon army. While this is great news, Denosk has more pressing matters to handle. The demon lord told him to pick out an assistant, so he has been reviewing applications. Honestly, he wishes he could just pick 𝐂𝐨𝐿𝐚Andra since she's so reliable. 𝐂𝐿𝐚Andra misunderstands this as a proposal and becomes a little embarrassed. At that moment, there's a knock at the door. Denosk opens it to find Olulu standing there. She announces that she's come to act as a representative of the ogre tribe in their alliance with the demon army. Expressing her deep gratitude, she explains that her father has become far more diplomatic since their encounter. To show her appreciation, she says she's willing to do anything to repay him. Taking her at her word, Denosk asks if she would like to become his personal assistant. Olulu eagerly agrees, but this makes 𝐂𝐴𝐚Andra jealous, and she pointedly avoids making eye contact with Denosk. She reminds herself that they're supposed to be rivals, which means she can't allow herself to be friends with him. Denosk has no clue why 𝐂𝐴𝐚Andra suddenly started behaving so oddly. That aside, it's been a successful month for him. The demon army has expanded significantly. However, with growth comes heightened risk, so it's essential for everyone to remain vigilant. A few days go by, and Denosk is busy working in his office as usual when Olulu enters and informs him that she has successfully negotiated with a werebear tribe. Just as he had requested, she explains that as long as their conditions are met, they are willing to support the demon army. Denosk is pleased to hear that the talks with the werebear tribe went smoothly, but Olulu has something else to share. She mentions that word has gotten around about Denosk being recognized for all the effort he has been putting in, and that an award ceremony will be taking place soon. She adds that she'll give him more details once his lunch break is over. Denosk has no clue what kind of award awaits him, but knowing the demon lord, he's confident it will be something far more exciting than a simple pizza party. At that moment, 𝐂𝐴𝐚Andra walks into Denosk's office, bringing lunch for the two of them to share, as they always do. While Denosk enjoys eating with 𝐂𝐴𝐚Andra, he despises the fact that the demon army's menu is limited to plain porridge. He understands the challenges of providing meals for an entire army, but he can't help but wish for some meat to accompany the bland porridge. Hearing Denosk's complaints, 𝐂𝐴𝐚Andra comes up with the perfect idea. If he wants meat, then they'll just have to go straight to the source to get it. Denosk isn't thrilled about the idea of going hunting just to satisfy his craving for meat, but that's not the only reason 𝐂𝐴𝐚Andra brought him out here. It turns out she received a request from the nearby demi-human tribes, asking for help in dealing with a magical beast that has been attacking them in this forest. So far, this creature has killed 5 orcs, and Denosk finds that absolutely awful. 𝐂𝐴𝐚Andra, however, has a different perspective. She explains that it's only natural for the weak to fall prey to the strong. Ordinarily, it would be the responsibility of the orc tribe to protect themselves from threats like this, but the beast they're facing is far too powerful for them to handle. Not wanting to see the orc tribe wiped out, 𝐂𝐴𝐚Andra decided to take on the task herself. Speaking of which, 𝐂𝐴𝐚Andra notices some mushrooms growing under a tree. From what she was told, all the orcs that got eaten were attacked while picking these mushrooms since they are a valuable ingredient. Therefore, the magical beast must be camping somewhere around here. If they wait long enough, then it's sure to attack. Evidently, they didn't have to wait long since the boar shows up behind them almost immediately. 𝐂𝐴𝐚Andra tells Denosk to run for cover while she handles this. She jumps into the air and heel kicks the boar's face into the ground, but in retaliation, the boar starts using its horns to throw rocks at 𝐂𝐴𝐚Andra. Although she can easily dodge them, Denosk can't, so he's freaking out. The boar charges forward, crashing through trees and heading straight for Denosk. Before it can reach him, 𝐂𝐴𝐚Andra delivers a solid punch to the boar's stomach. From Denosk's vantage point, it's obvious that 𝐂𝐴𝐚Andra is incredibly strong, but none of her hits so far have been lethal. In an ordinary fight, that might not matter, but their goal here is to hunt the creature. What 𝐂𝐴𝐚Andra is missing right now is the killing power needed to finish the job. The boar's sharp tusks make it a dangerous opponent, and one mistake on 𝐂𝐨𝐻𝐷ra's part could prove fatal. Her attacks are causing blunt force damage, but she needs to wrap this up quickly. Denosuke thinks she needs a weapon. He was right about 𝐂𝐨𝐷ra's blows not being strong enough to kill this thing as she is now. However, she has been holding back so far. She doesn't like using her true power because it takes a long time to recover from the effects, but she won't be able to kill this thing otherwise. The boar tries charging at her again, but this time 𝐂𝐨𝐷Ra is able to stop it with one hand. She could easily kill it with a single punch right now, but that might ruin its meat. So instead, she picks it up and snaps its neck. With the boar now defeated, 𝐂𝐨𝐷Ra tells Denosuke that they can finally have some meat. However, Denosuke has completely lost his appetite. Together, they haul the boar's body to the orc village to show the villagers that the threat has been taken care of. The villagers are incredibly thankful for 𝐂𝐨𝐷Ra's help and amazed that she managed to take down the boar all by herself. While 𝐂𝐨𝐷Ra is clearly enjoying all the admiration, she notes that it's not every day they come across so much meat. She decides to invite the entire village to share the boar with her. The villagers are all excited, but Denosuke can't believe they are actually okay with eating boar meat when that thing was one evolution cycle away from being their next door neighbor. However, he's even more surprised when he hears 𝐂𝐨𝐷Ra say she's going to cook the meat. He asks her if she's really serious about cooking, so 𝐂𝐨𝐷Ra offers to give him a taste of her homemade delicacy. Denosuke starts to feel genuinely excited as 𝐂𝐨𝐷Ra hypes up the meal, making it sound amazing. However, when he asks how she plans to prepare it, she simply throws a fireball at the meat. The result is a blackened lump of burnt flesh, and the expression on Denosuke's face makes it clear this is absolute garbage. 𝐂𝐨𝐷Ra insists he give it a try, claiming it's better than it looks. But when Denosuke takes a bite, it tastes just as awful as it appears. It's like someone dumped molten tar into his mouth, and he'd honestly prefer to starve than endure another bite of this disaster. 𝐂𝐨𝐷Ra tells Denosuke it's rude to insult someone's cooking like that. But Denosuke retorts that it's rude to call what she just did cooking. He has been enduring the culture shock of living in a new world so far, but this is too much for him to handle. He asks if everyone can let him handle the cooking from now on. Once Denosuke is done preparing the meat, 𝐂𝐨𝐷Ra takes one bite and realizes it actually tastes amazing. She asks Denosuke what he did, and he explains that first, he soaked the pork in water to get all the blood out. Then, he slow roasted it over a fire to remove the excess fat, and finally added it to a soup to get rid of any bad smells. Denosuke suggests teaching the villagers if they're interested in learning, and they're thrilled that one of the demon generals is showing such thoughtfulness. However, 𝐂𝐨𝐷Ra feels that someone of Denosuke's rank shouldn't be wasting time teaching villagers how to cook. Denosuke disagrees, explaining that his role is to improve the demon army, and a key part of any civilization's progress lies in advancing their culinary skills. He points out that when people have regular access to meat, they naturally find ways to enhance its flavor. But since meat is such a rarity here, no one has the luxury to experiment. In other words, this country is both impoverished and lacking in culinary knowledge. It might sound harsh the way Denosuke says it, but 𝐂𝐨𝐷Ra can't deny that he's right. This country is largely barren and, compared to its neighboring nations, it's relatively weak. That's precisely why they need to put in the effort to bring about change as part of the Big Four. With their work here finished, 𝐂𝐨𝐷Ra suggests they head back to the castle, but Denosuke isn't so sure it's a good idea since night has already fallen. 𝐂𝐨𝐷Ra reassures him that it won't be an issue, as she can light their way with a fireball. She's really proud of her magic prowess since it's an ability unique to demons, and Denosuke is quite impressed. It also makes sense why demi-humans, who can't use magic, train day in and out to become effective fighters, while demons like 𝐂𝐨𝐷Ra can rely solely on their magic. However, he thinks 𝐂𝐨𝐷Ra could stand to improve her combat techniques a little. For instance, even though her attack power rises dramatically when she uses her true power to transform her body, it takes a while for her body to recover afterward. He suggests that she should bring a weapon to help with combat next time and also wear armor that covers more of her body. As soon as Denosuke says this, 𝐂𝐨𝐷Ra freezes in place and extinguishes her light, while she recognizes that he might be right. His fixation on efficiency comes across as deeply insulting to her. Too angry to stay near him, she decides to leave Denosuke behind in the forest. Denosuke, confused about why she got so upset, quickly comes comes to the realization that lingering in this forest is a surefire way to end up as prey. Without wasting any more time, he bolts back to the orc village for safety. The next morning, Denosuke meets with the Demon Lord to give a report on the mission, and the Demon Lord congratulates him on his success. However, he also mentions that 𝐂𝐿mañdra returned last night, while Denosuke only arrived this morning with an escort from the orcs. The Demon Lord wants to know if something bad happened between him and 𝐂𝐿mañdra. Denosuke breaks down and says he's not worthy of being one of the demon army's generals. The Demon Lord urges Denosuke to calm down and explain what happened, so Denosuke recounts the entire situation. Recognizing that Denosuke unintentionally upset 𝐂𝐿mañdra, the Demon Lord emphasizes that the priority now is to mend their relationship for the good of the demon army. He gives Denosuke an official order to find a way to make amends with her. However, that's easier said than done. Denosuke remembers how proud 𝐂𝐿mañdra was when she mentioned that only demons are capable of using magic, but he suspects there's more to it than just that. Determined to find a solution, he begins reading a demon history book to gather some insight. Denosuke soon finds a chapter talking about how a strong physique is essential for a demon's magic power. This is why demons take great pride in their bodies, and often wear extremely revealing clothes. Denosuke now understands why 𝐂𝐿mañdra got so upset when he told her it would be more efficient to wear armor that covers her body more. He was basically rejecting her pride as a demon. Even if he knows why she got mad, he has no idea how he's going to repair their relationship. Meanwhile, back at the castle, Alulu has just finished chopping firewood for the day and is preparing to move on to her next task. She's stunned to suddenly find herself facing a threatening wall of despair. 𝐂𝐿mañdra, still upset over what happened with Denosuke, runs up to Alulu in tears, crying that Denosuke hates her and refuses to appreciate her body. Alulu has no idea what's going on at first, but after 𝐂𝐿mañdra explains what happened, she realizes where the misunderstanding might have come from. She tells 𝐂𝐿mañdra that, as a human, Denosuke's values are a lot different from theirs. In particular, Alulu knows that Denosuke doesn't think exposing your body is a good thing. 𝐂𝐿mañdra can't believe it since she's been exposing her body to him for weeks, and he never complained about it. Alulu explains that Denosuke likely assumed 𝐂𝐿mañdra was just some kind of exhibitionist, which is why he never brought it up. Hearing this, 𝐂𝐿mañdra suddenly realizes that if Denosuke was uncomfortable with her exposed body, then all the physical gestures of affection she had shown him might have seemed like inappropriate behavior. Overwhelmed with embarrassment and anger at herself for abandoning Denosuke in the forest, she begins slamming her face into the floor repeatedly. Alulu pleads with her to stop, worried that the floor won't be able to withstand much more of her outburst. 𝐂𝐿mañdra asks Alulu for advice on what she should do now since she got mad at Denosuke for no reason. Alulu tells her about a discussion she had with him when she first became his assistant. He told Alulu that he wanted her to stay true to her desires no matter what because he wanted her to feel free to talk about any troubles she had so they could come to a solution together, regardless of any misunderstandings. Alulu is sure 𝐂𝐿mañdra can make up with Denosuke as long as they talk it out. Denosuke and 𝐂𝐿mañdra eventually cross paths in the castle stairwell, each with something important to get off their chest. 𝐂𝐿mañdra blurts out that she's not trying to act like an easy girl. She just wanted him to compliment her body. At the same time, Denosuke admits that he thinks her body is attractive. They both pause for a moment to process each other's words, and realizing they're finally on the same page, Denosuke takes the opportunity to apologize. He confesses that he didn't know much about demons and hadn't understood that his words would come across as offensive to her. 𝐂𝐿mañdra accepts his apology and also apologizes to Denosuke. She acknowledges that it wasn't his fault that he didn't know about demon culture, and even if she was mad, she shouldn't have left him alone in the middle of the forest. Denosuke did nearly die because of that, so 𝐂𝐿mañdra feels really guilty, but since he ended up being okay, Denosuke says he forgives her. He's glad they were able to make up. And now that they've gotten the chance to learn a little about one another, Denosuke thinks they can become great partners, although he still doesn't realize that 𝐂𝐿mañdra interprets the word partner as a marriage proposal. Later, the Demon Lord summons all his subordinates for an important announcement. With alliances now established among the various tribes, the demon army has become significantly stronger than it was before, and it's all thanks to the tireless efforts of his newest general, Denosuke. To honor his accomplishments, The demon lord presents him with a magic stone. Denosuke feels deeply honored to receive such a priceless gift, but he humbly declines, explaining that he didn't achieve this alone. None of it would have been possible without 𝐂𝐻𝐿𝐴ndra's unwavering support by his side. Denosuke steps up to 𝐂𝐻𝐿𝐴ndra, kneels before her, and asks her to accept the magic stone alongside him. While 𝐂𝐻𝐿𝐴ndra is thrilled, she also panics because Denosuke is doing this in front of a crowd with so many onlookers. What Denosuke doesn't realize is that presenting a magic stone to a woman is essentially a marriage proposal in this world. So, without even knowing it, he just proposed to her in front of all the leaders of the demon army. The only reason 𝐂𝐻𝐿𝐴ndra doesn't immediately say yes is that she's too embarrassed by all the eyes on her. A few days later, Denosuke is summoned to a meeting with the demon lord. He's absolutely terrified, assuming he must have done something wrong. To get ahead of the situation, he immediately starts apologizing and desperately pleads to keep his job. The demon lord, caught off guard by Denosuke's reaction, reassures him that he's not in trouble at all. In fact, they recently held an award ceremony to celebrate how exceptional he is at his work. With that out of the way, the demon lord mentions that there's something he wants to talk about. He then asks Denosuke for his opinion on the current relationship between the demi-humans and the demons serving in the demon army. Based on what Denosuke has observed firsthand, it seems that the demi-humans feel inferior to the demons, primarily because only demons possess the ability to use magic. This is precisely the issue the demon lord has been working to resolve. He tasks Denosuke with finding a way to make magic accessible to everyone so that the demi-humans can stand on equal footing with the demons. While Denosuke agrees that it's a solid plan, there's one significant issue: he himself is incapable of using magic. So how is he supposed to figure out a method to make it usable for everyone? The demon lord acknowledges that it's a challenging task, which is precisely why he has given Denosuke a magic stone. He grants Denosuke full authority to decide how to use it in order to accomplish his mission. Knowing Denosuke won't be able to handle this alone, the demon lord assigns a magic specialist to assist him. That specialist is Sylphid, and the demon lord assures Denosuke that Sylphid is highly skilled when it comes to magic. However, he warns Denosuke to stay cautious, as Sylphid is notoriously difficult to deal with. Denosuke nods in understanding and exits the demon lord's throne room to search for Sylphid. While this is happening, 𝐂𝐻𝐿𝐴ndra watches Denosuke from behind the railing. For the past few days, she's been spying on him whenever she gets the chance, not only because she's curious about how his work is progressing, but also because she's still bubbling with excitement from Denosuke's marriage proposal a few days earlier. Denosuke eventually makes it to Sylphid's room and knocks on the door. However, it's Belinda who answers. She informs him that Sylphid isn't there at the moment and tells him he'll need to come back later. As she attempts to shut the door, Denosuke quickly wedges his foot in the doorway, insisting on coming in regardless. 𝐂𝐻𝐿𝐴ndra witnesses all of this unfold and begins to feel upset, wondering why Denosuke would flirt with another woman after proposing to her. Meanwhile, inside Sylphid's room, Belinda keeps trying to persuade Denosuke to leave, insisting that Sylphid isn't there. However, Denosuke isn't falling for it because he knows the truth: Belinda is actually Sylphid. She tries to deny it, but Denosuke has 3 solid reasons to believe she's lying. First, he's memorized the roster of all demon army officials, and there's no one named Belinda on the list. Second, the demon lord already spilled the beans and told him that Sylphid likes to disguise herself to avoid work. Sylphid has clearly been caught, so she admits that Denosuke is right about her, but he still doesn't understand why she would pretend to be her own assistant. Sylphid simply explains that if everyone knew her real identity, then they'd start giving her tons of work to do, and she hates work. Be that as it may, Denosuke has some work he needs to discuss with her, so he asks Sylphid if she can spare some time to talk about magic tools with him. However, Sylphid refuses to do anything that requires effort, even if it's under direct orders from the demon lord. Besides, she already made something like that in the past, so she has no reason to recreate it now. Denosuke is completely unaware that Sylphid had experimented with creating magic tools in the past. Noticing his interest, she decides to show him one of her inventions. She pulls out an object and explains that it's constructed from a mineral base designed to easily conduct magic, with layers of magic stone integrated into it. This setup enables it to cast all kinds of magic, which sounds exactly exactly like what Denosuke has been searching for. He immediately asks Sylphid if he can get permission to mass produce it. Sylphid responds that he's free to do whatever he wants, but there's one major issue: the prototype alone costs 10 million to make. To fund mass production, he's going to need an exceptionally good financial strategy. Since the device relies on high-level magic stones for its construction, it's no surprise that the cost is so high. Denosuke, however, is still stunned after hearing just how expensive these devices are, and he finally understands why Sylphid never moved forward with mass production. But he refuses to give up so easily. Determined to find a solution, he asks her if it might be possible to reduce the number of spells the device can cast. Based on what Sylphid explained, the device needs high-level magic stones to enable it to cast multiple types of magic, so he proposes simplifying it to focus on just a single spell. Sylphid is intrigued because she had never thought of it that way. After a little thinking, she confirms that limiting the device to one spell would significantly reduce the cost, since low-level magic stones could be used in production instead. She's really impressed that Denosuke was able to come up with that idea in such a short amount of time, and it just so happens that he has a magic stone on hand, so he asks Sylphid if this will work. Sylphid is starting to get invested in this idea, and since they already have all the necessary materials, she's ready to begin work right away, but she needs an assistant to help. So she drags Denosuke down into her basement, and she doesn't plan on letting him sleep tonight. Meanwhile, outside Sylphid's room, 𝐂𝐸𝐿𝐴ndra starts to grow suspicious, questioning what Denosuke could possibly be doing in Sylphid's office with a woman so late at night. By the next morning, Denosuke is shown slumped on the basement floor, barely conscious from a severe lack of sleep. Sylphid, though equally sleep-deprived, is bursting with excitement. She successfully redesigned her magic tool to cast just a single spell, which means it can now be mass-produced at a fraction of the cost compared to the original model, all thanks to her brilliance. However, before they can begin mass production, they still need to test it, so she tells Denosuke that he's going to be the test subject. Denosuke pleads with her to at least give him some time to rest since he's on the verge of collapse. Sylphid allows him to leave, but says she's only giving him a 1-hour break before he comes back, so they can start testing this thing. As Denosuke heads back to the front door, he's about to open it, but before he can do anything, 𝐂𝐸𝐿𝐴ndra barges in and demands to know what Denosuke has been doing all night. 𝐂𝐸𝐿𝐴ndra's actions result in Denosuke getting knocked unconscious, so she quickly drops to her knees and starts shaking him in an attempt to wake him up. Unfortunately, all the shaking only makes him feel dizzy. At that moment, Sylphid emerges from the basement, now dressed in her usual outfit to ensure that 𝐂𝐸𝐿𝐴ndra doesn't recognize her as the woman from earlier. 𝐂𝐸𝐸ndra is starting to question if what she saw earlier was right, but all of a sudden, 𝐂𝐸𝐸ndra's assistant, Lilim, and Olulu enter the room as well because there's a huge emergency. A flock of footprint birds has just attacked a few villages, and if nothing is done soon, those villages will be destroyed. Footprint birds are large, flightless birds known for their vicious nature, and they are such a threat that the Demon Lord has ordered them to do whatever it takes to exterminate those birds. That's why Lilim came looking for 𝐂𝐸𝐿𝐴ndra, since she's the only person capable of dealing with such a large flock. As she's being dragged away, 𝐂𝐸𝐸ndra voices her disappointment, lamenting that she wants to spend more time with Denosuke. Meanwhile, Sylphid sees this as the perfect chance to test her newly redesigned magic device. She plans to take Denosuke out to the battlefield to give it a try. Once outside, Denosuke warns the locals to step back, as what they're about to do might be dangerous. Sylphid sets the magic stone to cast a basic fire magic spell and hands it over to Denosuke to test. Before proceeding, Denosuke nervously asks if the device has any safety features. Sylphid casually assures him that even if it explodes, the worst that would happen is he'd lose an arm. That response doesn't exactly reassure him, but despite the risks, he decides to give it a shot anyway. As the flock of footprint birds approaches, Sylphid instructs him to start channeling power from the device. It makes a strange sound when Denosuke powers it up, but Sylphid tells him that's just how it operates. Now, she wants Denosuke to imagine that the device is an extension of his own body and let the energy flow until it accumulates in his right hand. Denosuke follows her instructions, and before long, he has formed a fireball in his hand. Denosuke is amazed that he was actually able to use magic, since the first phase raise was a success. Sylphid tells him to begin attacking the birds. Denosuke isn't entirely sure this will work, but he throws a fireball at one of the birds anyway, and it completely obliterates it. Encouraged by this success, Sylphid urges him to keep going until all the birds are taken care of. Denosuke then starts launching fireball after fireball, and for the first time since arriving in this world, he feels genuinely strong, as though he's capable of holding his own in a fight. However, that sense of power is short-lived. In the very next moment, the magic device burns out, leaving him unable to use magic anymore. As one of the birds swoops in, ready to finish him off, Sylphid quickly raises a barrier around him just in time. Denosuke tries using the device again, but this time, it just seems to be slowly attracting the birds instead of allowing Denosuke to use magic. Sylphid takes care of the birds that were coming after Denosuke, and then she asks him why he isn't using the device to cast magic anymore. He shows her the crystal, and it's clearly been overloaded. It looks like low-level magic crystals aren't enough to maintain the device after all. So, this experiment is a failure for now. They did manage to drive the birds away, so the villagers celebrate by making a pot of stew with the bird meat. While Denosuke is getting a bowl of stew, Sylphid is over by the tree, playing with one of the demi-human children. Denosuke comes over and expresses his surprise because he was under the impression that all demi-humans were strong, but he had no idea that some of them were this weak. Sylphid agrees with him, but even though they are weak, demi-humans like them are still very kind, and it reminds her a bit of her past. Sylphid was born into a merchant family of elves, but things went wrong and she ended up getting kicked out. She then lived as a wanderer for a while until she was welcomed into a village of demi-humans. The demi-humans treated Sylphid with incredible kindness, but since none of them could use magic, they were forced to live in poverty. Wanting to help, Sylphid dedicated herself to creating a device that would enable them to use magic. However, somewhere along the way, she became distracted and lost sight of her original purpose. Turning to Denosuke, she confesses that her ultimate goal as a researcher is to help people, which is why they must ensure the success of this project at all costs, especially since it's only a matter of time before more of those birds attack the village again. Denosuke thinks about it for a minute and comes up with a great idea. He asks Sylphid if she can make more of those magic devices by tomorrow morning. Since she already created the designs, it shouldn't take long to make more, but she won't be able to make any improvements to the design without her tools. Denosuke tells her she doesn't need to make any improvements since what he's trying to do will work with the current design. The following morning, Denosuke and Sylphid set out to face the flock of birds heading toward the village. Before the birds can reach their destination, Denosuke activates the magic devices he had planted in the ground earlier. The noise generated by all the devices powering on at once is so unsettling to the birds that they immediately abandon their plans to attack the village and retreat. The best part is that, since no actual spells were cast, the magic stones within the devices remain largely intact, ensuring they'll last for a long time. This means the remote villages can stay protected, while significantly cutting costs. The Demon Lord is thoroughly impressed with the innovation Denosuke and Sylphid managed to achieve. He praises both of them and instructs Sylphid to begin mass-producing the magic devices so they can be distributed to all the villages in need. Shortly afterward, Denosuke meets with Sylphid to express his gratitude, acknowledging that he never could have accomplished this on his own without her help. In turn, Sylphid thanks Denosuke for rekindling her excitement for her research and reminding her that her work is ultimately about helping others. Feeling genuinely appreciative, she tells him that if he ever needs assistance with anything in the future, he should feel free to come to her. Before leaving, Sylphid hands Denosuke a special magic device she crafted just for him. Unlike the standard models, which could only handle up to 10 spells, this one can manage at least 30, ensuring it will be a reliable tool if he ever finds himself in danger. Feeling encouraged, Denosuke returns to his office, more determined than ever to tackle his paperwork. However, before he can even begin, he's knocked out when Almondra bursts into the room. Having just learned about his research assignment with Sylphid, she came to apologize for assuming he was flirting with another woman despite proposing to her. But when she sees him lying unconscious on the floor, she panics and rushes to check if he's okay. Later, Denosuke invites 𝐂𝐸𝐸𝐿 to join him on a shopping trip. 𝐂𝐸𝐸𝐿, feeling incredibly nervous about the invitation, decides to seek advice from 𝐿𝐿𝐿. To her, being asked to go shopping with him can only mean one thing: Denosuke is asking her out on a date. With that in mind, 𝐂𝐸𝐸𝐿 plans to go all out to make a lasting impression. Her initial idea is to wear nothing but a bikini, thinking it will highlight her figure and leave a bold impression. However, 𝐿𝐿𝐿 advises against this approach, pointing out that such an outfit might make Denosuke uncomfortable due to its revealing nature. Instead, she suggests opting for something more modest. Taking 𝐿𝐿𝐿's advice, 𝐂𝐸𝐸𝐿 chooses a more conservative outfit, and to her relief, Denosuke seems to genuinely like her choice. Feeling encouraged by his reaction, she believes the date is going well and hopes it might strengthen her relationship with him, potentially taking it to the next level. Unfortunately, since this is Denosuke we're talking about, the real reason he invited 𝐂𝐸𝐸𝐿 on the shopping trip was to conduct market research. When 𝐂𝐸𝐸𝐿 realizes this wasn't a date after all, she feels deeply betrayed. Her frustration boils over, and she's practically seething with anger. Despite her annoyance, she still decides to support Denosuke and asks him about the purpose of his research. Denosuke explains that gathering the opinions of locals can provide him with fresh perspectives, which might help in improving the demon army. However, for the moment, he mentions that he simply wants to enjoy the scenery with 𝐂𝐸𝐸𝐿, leaving her momentarily flustered. But even then, it's still not a date. As they approach one of the stalls, the owner immediately recognizes Denosuke as one of the elite generals of the demon army. Denosuke is taken aback that people know who he is, but it turns out there have been rumors circulating about a human personally summoned by the demon lord, and his distinctive suit certainly doesn't help him blend in. The stall owner also recognizes 𝐂𝐸𝐸𝐿, and seeing the two of them together, he assumes they're on a date. However, 𝐂𝐸𝐸𝐿 quickly denies this, as Denosuke has already made it clear that the outing is strictly work-related. She explains that they are there to conduct market research. Hearing this, the stall owner offers to show them some of his finest goods, an exquisite set of pure gold ornaments. Wanting to make the most of this rare opportunity to serve a general of the demon army, he even offers a discount on a pair of matching cups if they decide to purchase them together. The stall owner begins to explain that these cups are typically purchased by couples who are about to get married. Without a second thought, Denosuke casually states that he wants to buy the set for himself and 𝐂𝐸𝐸𝐿, which leaves her with mixed feelings. To 𝐂𝐸𝐸𝐿, it almost seems like Denosuke is flirting with her, but the truth is far less romantic. He only bought the cups to gather more information from the shopkeeper. Once again, 𝐂𝐸𝐸𝐿 is left feeling disappointed. After wrapping up a bit more of their investigation, Denosuke sits down with her over some coffee to review the results of their research. According to his findings, the recent alliances formed with the other demi-human territories have been well received by the people, so the different cultures are integrating nicely. However, this has also led to some negative side effects. Specifically, the increase in population has caused an unprecedented food shortage, and the price of staple crops like 𝐾𝐈 is too high for people to afford. 𝐂𝐸𝐸𝐿 noticed the rising prices too. She went to one of the food retailers and demanded to know why they were making 𝐾𝐈 so expensive. But even while being violently shaken, the retailer told her that he can't afford to lower his prices, otherwise he would go into debt. The price of 𝐾𝐈 is clearly being inflated, but if the retailers aren't the ones behind the price hikes, then the wholesalers must be responsible. Wholesalers are tasked with distributing goods after purchasing them in bulk from farmers. Normally, this system operates smoothly, but there's a possibility that the wholesalers are intentionally raising the price of 𝐾𝐈 to increase their profits. As a result, retailers, who are forced to buy at the inflated rates, have no choice but to raise their own prices to stay afloat. Believing that the wholesalers are likely the culprits, 𝐂𝐸𝐸𝐿 suggests they storm into the wholesalers' building and demand that the prices be returned to normal. However, Denosuke doesn't think that's a good idea, since what he said about the wholesalers being responsible is still pure speculation right now. They can't risk making the wholesalers angry because it could cause a national disaster if they aren't careful. Wholesalers are managed by a large commercial guild, and they command a fair bit of power. So, before they act, they need to gather more information regarding the matter. With that said, 𝐂𝐸𝐿 says they are done with their market research for the day, but there's still a lot of time before they have to return to the castle. So, 𝐂𝐸𝐿 asks 𝐂𝐵𝐿𝐵𝐿 if there's anything she wants to try in the meantime. 𝐂𝐵𝐿𝐵𝐿 feels a surge of excitement, thinking this might finally be her chance to enjoy a proper date with 𝐂𝐸𝐿. However, her hopes for some alone time are quickly dashed when Gnome suddenly shows up. 𝐂𝐸𝐿, surprised by her appearance, asks if she's out shopping as well. Gnome explains that today is a significant day for her people, and she's here to buy gifts for those she cares about. In this instance, she's purchasing gifts for her comrades from the demon army. However, her lingering grudge against 𝐂𝐵𝐿𝐵𝐿 ensures that 𝐂𝐵𝐿𝐵𝐿 won't be receiving anything from her. Just then, Gnome is approached by two rat demi-humans, and they plead with her to help save their store from bankruptcy. These two seem pretty desperate, so 𝐂𝐸𝐿 and the others decide to follow them back to their store and ask what the problem is. The rat couple explains that they have run the store for years and sold a food called 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐂𝐋𝐸, but year after year, their sales have been declining, so they have been struggling to stay in business for a while. Recently, however, they were approached by a prominent merchant named 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿𝐵𝐿𝐵𝐿, who placed a large order with them, claiming he could make a substantial profit by reselling the 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿𝐵𝐿𝐵 since GIM has become so expensive these days. Overjoyed by the prospect of such a big sale, the couple worked tirelessly through the night, using up every last ingredient they had to complete 𝐃𝐈𝐿𝐵𝐿𝐵𝐿's order. But this morning, when he was supposed to pick it up, he abruptly backed out of the deal, stating he was no longer interested. Now the couple is stuck with an enormous amount of unsold product, and if they don't act quickly, they'll face bankruptcy from all the money they invested. The problem is definitely serious, but Gnome can't think of any way to solve it. So she turns to 𝐂𝐸𝐿 because she had heard that he's a good problem solver. She asks him if he has any ideas on how they can help the couple save their store, and thankfully, with the information he gathered from the market today, 𝐂𝐸𝐿 says he has the perfect solution. Gnome asks if he is really sure he can handle this, so 𝐂𝐸𝐿 assures her that his plan will work, meaning she can leave the rest to him. The first step in 𝐂𝐸𝐿's plan is to have the couple clearly state their objective, so he asks them to specify exactly what they hope to achieve. Since 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿𝐵𝐿 has a shelf life of just one day, they need to sell all 300 servings that were prepared before the day ends. 𝐂𝐸𝐿 had the chance to try some of the 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 earlier, and it reminded him of matcha from Japan. However, it's missing one crucial element. Like matcha, 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 doesn't have much flavor on its own, making it an excellent base to pair with various side dishes and spices to make it more appealing. Now, the only thing to do is decide what flavor they would like to add to the 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿. 𝐂𝐸𝐿 asks the couple about their usual customer base. They answer, saying that since 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿𝐵𝐿 is a traditional food, it isn't really popular among young people. But now, it is even losing popularity among older people as well. To be honest, the couple can understand why, since they too are getting sick of the bland flavor. 𝐂𝐵𝐿𝐵𝐿 can't believe the rats chose to continue selling 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿𝐵𝐿 when even they don't like it anymore. But that's beside the point. They don't have much time before the 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿𝐵𝐿𝐿 goes bad, so 𝐂𝐸𝐿 suggests that they split up the workload. He and the couple will stay here and think of good flavors to pair with the 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿𝐵𝐿, while 𝐂𝐵𝐿𝐵𝐿 will go to the stores he wrote down on a list and ask for their assistance with his plan. After gathering everything they need, 𝐂𝐸𝐿 heads into the market with a drum set to capture the crowd's attention. He announces that today is Ruya Day and invites everyone to join in the festivities he has planned. The crowd seems intrigued by the lively atmosphere and curious about what Ruya Day is, as they've never heard of it before. Seeing their interest, 𝐂𝐸𝐿 begins explaining the holiday. He recounts an old legend about a beautiful girl and a man who sold 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿𝐵𝐿. The two met by chance in the market one day and fell in love at first sight. However, a powerful man desired the girl for himself and wanted to make her his bride. When she rejected the king's proposal, he became consumed with jealousy and forbade her from ever seeing the man she loved again. However, the two of them still snuck out to meet one another, and under the starry night sky, they both ate 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿𝐵𝐿 and wished that they could live together without sneaking around. That's when their prayers were answered by the heavens, and the two of them were pulled up into the night sky to live happily ever after. This legend is the basis of the Ruya festival, and it is said that if you exchange 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿𝐵𝐿 with a loved one and eat it together. Your wish might come true. The crowd seems really intrigued by Denosuke's story, so they want to buy some 𝐂𝐤𝐲𝐲 and try out the tradition. It just so happens that Denosuke knows a couple who have a boatload of 𝐂𝐤𝐲𝐲 in stock. Most people think of 𝐂𝐤𝐲𝐲 as a bland and unexciting snack. But after some brainstorming with Denosuke, the couple managed to transform it by introducing new and innovative variations. The result is a hit. The crowd starts buying 𝐂𝐤𝐲𝐲 in large quantities. Even though 𝐂𝐨𝐸𝐻𝐿 had complete confidence in Denosuke's ability to find a solution, she's still amazed that he managed to convince so many young people to enjoy a snack traditionally associated with older generations. Denosuke explains that when a product's popularity is declining, the key to reviving it is to shift the target audience. During their earlier market research, Denosuke noticed that the market was bustling with young people and families, making them the perfect demographic to focus on. With the new marketing strategy and flavors, Denosuke wouldn't be surprised if 𝐂𝐤𝐲𝐲 became the best-selling item in the market overnight. In fact, he's already thinking of plans to open chain stores and expand overseas to increase profits, but 𝐂𝐨𝐸𝐻𝐿 snaps him out of his business dream. Later that night, as the crowd starts dying down, Denosuke and 𝐂𝐨𝐸𝐻𝐿 go to meet the couple. The couple can't thank them enough for their help because they managed to sell all their stock thanks to them. Denosuke tells them not to worry about it because their success wasn't because of him alone. It was also due to their own hard work, 𝐂𝐨𝐸𝐻𝐿's help, and gnome as well. Gnome may have left early on, but throughout the day, Denosuke heard from several demi-humans that Gnome had recommended the 𝐂𝐤𝐲𝐲 store to them. It's clear she spread the word to help out, even if she didn't stick around. To express their gratitude, the couple offers Denosuke and 𝐂𝐨𝐸𝐻𝐿 a plate of 𝐂𝐤𝐲𝐲 to share, which Denosuke happily accepts. 𝐂𝐨𝐸𝐻𝐿 starts blushing as she recalls the legend about sharing 𝐂𝐤𝐲𝐲 with someone you love, that doing so could make your wish come true. For Denosuke to so eagerly share the plate with her must mean something special. She tries to keep her excitement in check, but then Denosuke pulls out the wedding cups he bought earlier and announces that he wants to give one of them to her. The evidence that he wants to marry her is overwhelming at this point, so 𝐂𝐨𝐸𝐻𝐿 asks him what he plans to wish for while they share the 𝐂𝐤𝐲𝐲. Without skipping a beat, Denosuke answers that he plans to wish for the success of his next project. 𝐂𝐨𝐸𝐻𝐿 is once again disappointed. Later that night, Denosuke goes to meet with the Demon Lord because he has something important to discuss with him. During his market research today, he managed to discover a lot of useful information, but most notably, he discovered these golden ornaments for sale. These ornaments originated from a nearby nation known as the Golden Country due to its abundant gold mines. If the Demon Lord intends to expand the demon army, Denosuke suggests establishing trade ties with the Golden Country. The Demon Lord agrees that this is an excellent idea and declares that trade negotiations will begin as soon as possible. He already has the perfect item in mind for trade, one of the magic devices. However, Denosuke immediately expresses his concerns, arguing that the magic devices are advanced technology unique to the demon army and shouldn't be sold so easily. Despite Denosuke's hesitation, the Demon Lord has a different perspective on the matter. No matter what precautions they take, the technology will inevitably be stolen by outsiders or replicated at some point. However, what cannot be replicated is talent. As long as the Demon Lord has skilled individuals like his 4 generals by his side, he is confident that they will continue to develop even more advanced magical devices in the future. He entrusts Denosuke with the responsibility of managing all the trade negotiations, but also cautions him to tread carefully, as the king of the Golden Country is known to be a formidable one. Denosuke's day to begin the negotiations arrives, and he prepares to set off for the Golden Country, where he is to meet the king. Just before his departure, 𝐂𝐨𝐻𝐿 approaches him by the carriage, expressing concern that he might run into trouble and suggesting that she accompany him. However, since this negotiation is intended to be his first mission alone, Denosuke insists that he must handle it by himself. 𝐂𝐨𝐻𝐿 acknowledges that Denosuke wants to handle this on his own, but she cautions him that the king of the Rampage Country has a notoriously short temper, so he must be mindful of his words when speaking to him. She gives an example, mentioning that the king once threw a merchant to a crocodile simply for persistently trying to sell him a carriage full of counterfeit goods. Hearing this, 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 begins to feel uneasy as well. However, he still has no choice but to proceed, so his carriage sets off. As he departs, 𝐿𝐿𝐴ndra calls out words of encouragement and reminds him to keep his distance from the women of the Golden Country. After a lengthy journey, 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 at last reaches the Golden Country, also called Rampage, and it proves to be just as vibrant as the rumors had described. He feels reassured about his decision to pursue negotiations with this nation, as up until now, the demon army has only been exporting crops like 𝐾𝐈 in exchange for foreign currency. However, with the recent surge in population, not only has the demon army completely depleted its own 𝐾𝐈 supply, but it has also been forced to depend on importing those crops as well. To fix this, 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 plans to trade for something valuable like gold, and what better place to acquire gold than from the Golden Country. 𝐃𝐈𝐿 is easily able to secure an audience with the king thanks to his position as one of the demon army's elite generals, and after a few moments, the king of the kingdom enters his throne room. 𝐃𝐈𝐿 bows his head in greeting and starts to introduce himself, but the king already knows everything about him. He is aware that 𝐃𝐈𝐿 was summoned to this world a few months ago as one of the demon generals, and that, since then, he has expanded the demon army's influence while implementing several reforms. By all accounts, the king acknowledges 𝐃𝐈𝐿's talent, but there is still one thing he finds puzzling if 𝐃𝐈𝐿 has been serving as a demon general for several months. Why is this the first time he has come to pay his respects to the king? The king visibly upset, and 𝐃𝐈𝐿 doesn't know what to say, so he starts apologizing. But with the way things are going, it looks like negotiations might break down before they even begin. The king then asks 𝐃𝐈𝐿 if there's a reason he called for this meeting. So, 𝐃𝐈𝐿 points to the cart behind him and says he has brought an offering for the king. 𝐃𝐈𝐿 presents a collection of the finest silverware the demon army has to offer, but this is the king of the Golden Country, after all, and he takes great offense at the idea of receiving silver as a gift. Now, in an even worse mood, the king grows furious, prompting 𝐃𝐈𝐿 to quickly apologize. However, unbeknownst to the king, this was actually all part of 𝐃𝐈𝐿's plan. 𝐃𝐈𝐿 then takes out the magic device, offering it to the king as an apology for displeasing him with the silver. Initially, the king isn't particularly impressed, as he can tell the device is made from a low-level magic stone. While that may be true, 𝐃𝐈𝐿 explains that this magic device has the ability to repel magical beasts, an exclusive invention of the demon army that cannot be found anywhere else. 𝐃𝐈𝐿 is well aware that the Golden Country struggles with a magical beast problem in its mines. The king doesn't refute this, so 𝐃𝐈𝐿 continues, mentioning that he has heard about the rock golems that wreak havoc in the mines, disrupting the miners' work and forcing the king to maintain a dedicated mine defense force. However, with these magic devices, he could eliminate the need for a defense force entirely, while also guaranteeing the miners' safety and significantly boosting productivity. 𝐃𝐈𝐿 then presents a small collection of rosmarins to the king, stating that these will serve as his offering for today. However, if the king finds them useful, he is welcome to purchase more from the demon army. Intrigued by the proposal, the king is certainly interested in acquiring more, but only if 𝐃𝐈𝐿 can first prove that his claims about the magical devices are indeed true. With a snap of his fingers, the lights go out, and the king's pet crocodile is released right next to 𝐃𝐈𝐿. If 𝐃𝐈𝐿 is telling the truth about the magic devices, then the king believes he should have no problem driving the crocodile away. This is an absolutely terrifying way to be tested, and internally, 𝐃𝐈𝐿 is panicking. However, he firmly believes in the effectiveness of the magic devices, so he raises one and activates it in an attempt to drive the crocodile away. The device does its job, successfully repelling the beast, but as the crocodile retreats from 𝐃𝐈𝐿, it suddenly spots the king and decides to lunge at him instead. 𝐃𝐈𝐿 sees this and tries to use one of the devices to shoot a fireball at the crocodile, but it turns out that 𝐃𝐈𝐿's help wasn't necessary because the king easily strikes the crocodile down and turns it into ash. He is impressed that the magic devices really do work, but he is also impressed with 𝐃𝐈𝐿 as a person. Although 𝐃𝐈𝐿 is a commoner, he possesses the confidence to stand before the king as an equal. His talent for negotiation is evident, and he didn't hesitate to take action the moment he believed the king's life was at risk. Impressed by his resolve, the king develops a liking for him and agrees to purchase the rosmarins from the demon army. As payment, he places 3 gold bars in front of Denisuk. With this amount, Denisuk says the demon army can prepare 200 units within the next month. But the king is an impatient man, so he says he is only giving them 1 week to prepare the units. As compensation for the shortened time frame, he brings out several tons of gold. The negotiations were a success, but producing 200 units within a week will be an incredibly difficult task. Denisuk turns to Sylphid, asking if there's any way to meet the deadline, but she immediately tells him that it's impossible. They've only just started mass producing the rosmarins, and expecting to manufacture that many in such a short time is simply unrealistic. Denisuk pleads with her to see if there's something she can do, but she can't just pull an extra 50 workers out of nowhere. Plus, local demand for the rosmarins has also been on the rise, so she says they are already overworked as it is now. She reprimands Denisuk for agreeing to such a large order without first considering the workload at the production site. Denisuk acknowledges that he may have made a mistake. However, as he reflects on the situation, he recalls reviewing the logistics report on rosmarin distribution just a few days ago. According to the report, priority had been given to the areas with magical beast issues, so overall, rosmarin demand should be pretty low right now, meaning Sylphid was lying to him about being understaffed so she could get out of doing more work. Sylphid realizes she's been caught, so she has no choice but to agree to fill the order, and she promises to make the 200 units by next week. Just then, a messenger from the Golden Country rushes in with an urgent update. The Golden King was so impressed by the rosmarin that he now wants even more. That initial order of 200 has just increased to 300. Regardless, through immense effort and countless hours of overtime, the production team somehow manages to manufacture all 300 units within the 2-week deadline. Now that the quota has been met, Denisuk can finally take a well-deserved break. Alulu congratulates him for managing to fulfill the order. But speaking of which, she's been wondering how much did Denisuk sell the rosmarin for. Denisuk tells her he got the Golden King to pay 50,000 for each rosmarin. So for the 300 units he ordered, it comes out to 150 million. Alulu is stunned that Denisuk actually managed to persuade the Golden King to pay such a high price. But it was all thanks to his well-planned psychological strategy. Since the devices are still unfamiliar to the market, they have the freedom to set the price as they see fit. To establish the rosmarin's value, Denisuk first presented the king with costly gifts, creating the perception of high worth from the start. He intentionally chose silverware so the Golden King would be angered. But even if he rejected the silverware, he would still acknowledge that they are objectively valuable goods. That way, when Denisuk brought out the rosmarin, it would automatically seem like it was incredibly valuable. Alulu never imagined that Denisuk was capable of something like this, but she is thoroughly impressed. She then asks if he had anticipated receiving such a large number of orders, but that part actually took him by surprise. He's simply relieved that they were able to complete the orders on time. However, just then, the Golden Country messenger returns with another update. The Golden King now wants to place an additional order for 100 more units. Denisuk immediately starts having visions of how angry Sylphid is going to be when they tell her about the extra order. So he heads downstairs and prepares to beg for her cooperation so they can get it done. Sylphid isn't happy about it, but she agrees to do what she can to fill the additional orders. She brings in additional workers and trains them in the process of making the rosmarin. With the new team in place, they continue making steady progress toward finishing the last 100 sets. Now, the only thing remaining is to complete the delivery. With continuous use, the rosmarin should last about a month, meaning the Golden King will have to keep buying from the demon army indefinitely. So this mission has been a resounding success for Denisuk. However, just as he was starting to relax, Alulu comes running into his office and tells him the Golden King just cancelled the entire order. Denisuk desperately asks Alulu to say she's joking, but unfortunately, it's the truth. The Golden King cancelled all the remaining orders after receiving the first 100. This puts them in a serious predicament since they have yet to receive their gold payment. On top of that, they've already spent a significant portion of the demon army's budget on raw materials for the rosmarins. Because of this, budget cuts had to be implemented. The demi-human forces didn't get a new weapon shipment, and the merchants are left wondering if they should do business in another country. Denisuk is left questioning where he might have gone wrong in this deal, fearing that he may have somehow offended the Golden King. But But another thought troubles him. How is it possible that a rosmarin replica is already circulating in the market? However, regardless of the reason, the demon army's funds have been drained because of his actions, and morale is plummeting, so he feels like he needs to take responsibility. He goes to meet with the Demon King and tells him that this whole mess is his fault. The Demon King questions Denisuke, asking why he believes he is responsible for the current situation. In response, Denisuke explains that he already knew how self-centered and impatient the Golden King could be. However, he was so pleased with how well the negotiations went that he neglected to take the potential risks into account. He says he is willing to accept whatever punishment the Demon King has for him, but the Demon King has no intention of punishing him. No one can expect to succeed all the time, and no matter how carefully you plan, sometimes things just go wrong, so he doesn't hold Denisuke responsible for what happened. What truly matters is that Denisuke takes this as a learning experience and uses it to better himself moving forward. Denisuke takes the Demon King's encouragement to heart, so he leaves the throne room, and the first thing he wants to do is formally apologize to the people who were affected by this mishap. First on the list are the troops under Gnome, who got their budget cut, but as he runs into Gnome at the bottom of the staircase, she doesn't seem mad at him at all. Next, he heads to Sylphid's room to apologize to her as well, but before he can finish, she interrupts him, saying she's just relieved to finally get a break now that she no longer has to fulfill those orders. Seeing that she isn't upset with him, Denisuke feels relieved and leaves, turning his thoughts to anyone else he might still need to apologize to. However, all of a sudden, he gets stuffed in a sack and is dragged away. He thinks this must have been done by someone who wants revenge for all the trouble he caused, so as soon as he manages to free himself from the sack, he begins apologizing again. However, the one who kidnapped him turns out to be Ōmandra, and she's not trying to get revenge, she just wanted to enjoy some meat with him. The two sit down together, and Denisuke turns to her, asking if she's trying to cheer him up. Flustered, Ōmandra hesitates for a moment before admitting that's exactly what she's doing. Denisuke appreciates her thoughtfulness and thanks her, which makes Ōmandra realize this might be the perfect chance to get a little closer to him. She slowly inches toward him, but just then, Alulu suddenly appears behind them, causing Ōmandra to quickly pull away. Alulu had only intended to bring them some fruit, but as she gets closer, she realizes she may have walked in on a moment between the two. Later that night, both Alulu and Ōmandra eventually drift off to sleep. Denisuke gently covers them to keep them from catching a cold, feeling grateful to have colleagues like them. Rather than condemning him for his failure, they chose to support and cheer him up. Because of that, Denisuke is more determined than ever to help the demon army recover, no matter what it takes. Meanwhile, the Golden King is seen striking a deal for the cheaper rosmarins. Since these are just as effective while costing only half the price, he didn't think twice about switching suppliers. However, he can't help but wonder how 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿𝐼𝐴N managed to get his hands on the rosmarins. 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿𝐼𝐴N, with a smug smile, simply responds that it's top secret, making it all too clear that he must have done something illegal. Now that Denisuke has accepted the reality of the situation, he begins working on countermeasures, with the first step being to determine how counterfeit rosmarins ended up flooding the market. These counterfeits were likely produced in under a month. Yet none of it adds up for Denisuke, as reverse engineering the rosmarins and figuring out how to replicate them should have taken an extensive amount of time. The only logical conclusion is that someone unlawfully sold rosmarins obtained from the demon army. While the demon army distributed rosmarins throughout the nation, they were only sent to regions that had suffered devastating monster attacks, and the people in those areas wouldn't jeopardize their safety just for quick financial gain. Suddenly, Ōmandra storms into Denisuke's office, informing him that the rosmarins distributed across the kingdom are reportedly not working. Now, he has more than just one issue on his hands. Together, he and Ōmandra travel to one of the villages that reported the malfunctioning rosmarins, only to find the entire place ravaged by magical beasts. Neither the village chief nor Denisuke can comprehend how this could have happened, as the rosmarins are specifically designed to repel all magical creatures. However, when Denisuke starts digging into the ground to check if something is wrong with the rosmarins that were buried there, he uncovers a serious issue they're missing. He and the others inspect all the remaining locations where the rosmarins had been concealed, and, just as expected, every last one of them is gone. This discovery convinces Denisuke that someone has been stealing the rosmarins, but he needs needs to verify this suspicion before making a move. To that end, he asks 𝐂𝐿mandra to assist him in mapping out all the villages that have reported missing rosmarins. After some careful planning, 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐂𝐋𝐿 takes 𝐂𝐿mandra out late at night to conduct an investigation, though she doesn't understand why they've come to this specific village, as no complaints have been reported here. Just then, 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 notices movement in the field and quickly signals 𝐂𝐿mandra to stay silent while they remain hidden behind a tree. As they watch, two suspicious individuals move around before eventually digging up one of the rosmarins. However, just as they are about to make their escape, 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 and 𝐂𝐿mandra step in to confront them. This is precisely what 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 had suspected, and it perfectly explains why the counterfeits matched the originals in quality yet were being sold at such a low price. Someone has been hiring thieves to steal the genuine rosmarins and resell them, and since the goods are stolen, the mastermind behind it all can offer them at ridiculously low prices while still turning a significant profit. 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 demands that the thieves reveal the identity of their employer, but they have no intention of talking. Instead, one of them suddenly lunges at 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿, claws bared. Luckily, 𝐂𝐿mandra comes to 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿's defense and knocks the thief out. The other one tries to attack her as well, but he gets knocked down too. Realizing they stand no chance, the two thieves start running away. 𝐂𝐿mandra is about to chase after them so they don't get away, but 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 tells her there's no need since the rosmarins they just stole are fakes. The next day, 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 receives the stolen rosmarins and, as planned, presents them to the Golden King as requested. The Golden King is thoroughly impressed with 𝐃𝐈𝐿's work, as he managed to produce a product just as effective as the demon armies, all while offering it at half the price. Not only that, but he also somehow managed to produce dozens of rosmarins in a single night, something that should be physically impossible. However, the Golden King doesn't dwell on the details. Instead, he showers 𝐃𝐈𝐿 with praise for being such an exceptional merchant, and 𝐃𝐈𝐿 gladly accepts the compliments, taking pride in his ability to do whatever it takes to satisfy his customers. If it wasn't already obvious, 𝐃𝐈𝐿 is an extremely wealthy merchant, but he's far from an honest one. He built his fortune by purchasing goods at low prices and reselling them for a hefty profit, which wouldn't be too concerning on its own except for the shady methods he employs in his business dealings. The moment he learned that the Rampage Kingdom had formed a contract with the demon army, he immediately saw it as a golden opportunity to make a quick fortune. He managed to acquire one of the rosmarins and had his craftsman attempt to reverse engineer it so he could produce his own version. However, his plan hit a roadblock when his craftsman informed him that the rosmarin was far too complex to replicate. So 𝐃𝐈𝐿 naturally moved on to the next best option. He stole the rosmarins directly from the demon army. Of course, what he did is very illegal and immoral too, but as long as 𝐃𝐈𝐿 gets his gold, he doesn't care what he has to do. He leaves the Rampage Kingdom with his cart full of gold, and a few days later, he returns with more stolen rosmarins to sell to the Golden King. But to his surprise, just as he reaches the front gate, he is suddenly stopped by the guards. They inform him that the Golden King has issued an order for his arrest, without giving him a chance to resist. The guards seize 𝐃𝐈𝐿 and escort him straight to the king's throne room. Completely baffled by the situation, 𝐃𝐈𝐿 demands to know why he has been forcibly brought before the king. The king pulls out one of the rosmarins that 𝐃𝐈𝐿 sold to him on his previous visit and crushes it because it's a fake. All the rosmarins 𝐃𝐈𝐿 brought were fake, so now the Golden King wants an explanation. 𝐃𝐈𝐿 is in complete disbelief and quickly tries to convince the king that this must be a misunderstanding, insisting that he would never dare sell faulty goods to someone of his stature. However, the king's patience is thinner than a thread, meaning there's no way 𝐃𝐈𝐿 is going to talk his way out of this one. To make things even worse for him, there's someone else in the room who has something to say. 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 walks out from the shadows and introduces himself to 𝐃𝐈𝐿. 𝐃𝐈𝐿 is even more nervous than he was before, because he has heard the rumors about 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿, the demon army general, and he is absolutely terrifying. It is said that he had the power to bend the Minotaur and other powerful demi-humans to his will, and has achieved many other things in just a few months. Without a doubt, he's the most fearsome person in the demon army, so 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿𝐼𝐿 is terrified by what 𝐃𝐈𝐿 must have in store for him. 𝐃𝐈𝐿 starts his statement by revealing that someone has been stealing the demon army's rosmarins lately, and he has strong reasons to suspect that 𝐃𝐈𝐿𝐼𝐿 is behind it. That's why, in order to put an end to the theft, he devised a flawless replica of the rosmarin. At first glance, it looks exactly like a genuine one, but in reality, it has no effect. The design is so precise that even the king himself couldn't distinguish it from the real thing, and for that, 𝐃𝐈𝐿 owes his thanks to 𝐶𝐿fid for the impeccable craftsmanship. After discovering that someone had been stealing the rosmarins, 𝐃𝐈𝐿 sought out 𝐶𝐿fid for assistance in crafting replicas. Initially, she declined, as creating something like that would take an immense amount of effort. However, seeing how desperate 𝐃𝐈𝐿 was, she eventually agreed, but only on the condition that he bring her a cake. Once 𝐶𝐿fid finished making the fake rosmarins, 𝐃𝐈𝐿 studied a village map to predict the next likely target of the thieves. He then arrived in advance to set a trap. As expected, the thieves appeared and took off with the fake rosmarins. But with that said, it's strange that 𝐃𝐈𝐿𝐼𝐿 is in possession of those same fake rosmarins. 𝐃𝐈𝐿𝐼𝐿 realizes he's majorly screwed because all of this was part of 𝐃𝐈𝐿's plan to expose him, and he's doing it in front of the Golden King too. There's no chance of 𝐃𝐈𝐿𝐼𝐿 escaping. No matter how he looks at it, his odds of survival aren't looking good. So, as a last resort, 𝐃𝐈𝐿𝐼𝐿 drops to his knees and starts pleading for his life. He apologizes to the king for what he has done, insisting that he only stole the rosmarins to secure the best possible deal for him. He claims he had no idea it was wrong, even though he realizes how ridiculous that excuse sounds. It doesn't matter as long as it persuades the king to let him live. But unfortunately for 𝐃𝐈𝐿𝐼𝐿, mercy isn't one of the king's strong suits. The king declares that he is sentencing 𝐃𝐈𝐿𝐼𝐿 to death. He uses his powers to create a lightning cage around 𝐃𝐈𝐿𝐼𝐿 and then drops one of his crocodiles from the ceiling. 𝐃𝐈𝐿𝐼𝐿 screams in terror as he sees the hungry crocodile approaching him, and as he is slowly being attacked, he tries to flee, but there's nowhere to go. As despair begins to take hold, 𝐃𝐈𝐿𝐼𝐿 slowly accepts the grim reality that this is where his life will end. His last thought before death approaches is of his children, and how he will no longer be able to care for them once he's gone. However, just as the crocodile is about to sink its jaws into him, 𝐃𝐈𝐿 quickly activates his personal magic device and fires a blazing fireball at the beast. The king is furious that 𝐃𝐈𝐿 would dare to disrupt the execution, since 𝐃𝐈𝐿 was involved in the matter. The king had generously permitted him to be present and state his case against 𝐃𝐈𝐿𝐼𝐿, but that did not give him the authority to meddle in affairs of the state. He demands to know if 𝐃𝐈𝐿 is prepared to take responsibility for his actions. However, 𝐃𝐈𝐿 insists that he had a valid reason for intervening and asks the king to listen to what he has to say. The king is even more enraged and unleashes his twin lightning dragons, but he is willing to listen to what 𝐃𝐈𝐿 has to say, so he lets him speak. First of all, 𝐃𝐈𝐿 makes it clear that he is not doing this because he cares about 𝐃𝐈𝐿𝐼𝐿. He is doing it solely for the benefit of the Golden King. He argues that executing 𝐃𝐈𝐿𝐼𝐿 will ultimately bring about the downfall of the Rampage Kingdom. However, the king finds it hard to believe that a single deceitful merchant could hold such significance. But the moment 𝐃𝐈𝐿 brings up the orange powder, the king's interest is immediately piqued. The Rampage Kingdom was formed thanks to its gold mines and has continued to thrive ever since. But in recent years, the amount of gold has diminished, which is why it is important to extract as much gold as possible from minerals. To do this, orange powder is used. By applying magic to the powder, it is possible to extract nothing but gold from the dirt, and the person in charge of importing the orange powder is 𝐃𝐈𝐿𝐼𝐿. So, 𝐃𝐈𝐿 tells the king that he cannot execute 𝐃𝐈𝐿𝐼𝐿. The king remains unconvinced, arguing that he can simply appoint another merchant to handle the import of orange powder. But 𝐃𝐈𝐿 explains that it's not that simple. The orange powder comes from the country of Toki, and after numerous civil wars over it, Toki has now imposed strict restrictions on its export. As a result, no new merchant would be able to acquire it. However, 𝐃𝐈𝐿𝐼𝐿 is a rare exception to this rule. 𝐃𝐈𝐿𝐼𝐿 is puzzled as to how Denosuke could possibly know all of this. In response, Denosuke explains that some time ago, he had been investigating orange powder, hoping to obtain some and use it to produce gold for the demon army. However, he ultimately found it to be impossible. Shifting back to 𝐃𝐈𝐒𝐿 during one of Toki's civil wars, the people found themselves struggling with a severe shortage of food and supplies, as no country was offering support and all the merchants had already fled. Yet, despite Toki becoming an active war zone, 𝐃𝐈𝐿 continued conducting trade there, which allowed the city's economy to endure throughout the war. That is why Toki, as well as several other countries, are indebted to 𝐃𝐈𝐿. So he has received special permission to trade certain restricted goods, even if some of his methods might be shady. Denosuke thinks it would be a shame to kill a merchant as skilled as 𝐃𝐈𝐿. Denosuke presents a rather convincing argument, leading the king to dispel his lightning dragon. However, he still struggles to understand why Denosuke would go to such lengths. After all, even if 𝐃𝐈𝐿 were to be killed and the Rampage Kingdom were to fall, it wouldn't have any direct impact on the demon army. Not to mention, 𝐃𝐈𝐿 had outright stolen from them. Denosuke doesn't understand why the king is so confused, since it's natural to want to help someone if you see them in trouble. Both 𝐃𝐈𝐿 and the king are shocked by how innocent Denosuke is, so much so that the king bursts out laughing and can hardly control himself. He's in a good mood now, so he decides to let 𝐃𝐈𝐿 live and leaves to go take a nap. Denosuke and 𝐃𝐈𝐿 are then thrown out of the throne room, but at least they've made it out alive. Still, 𝐃𝐈𝐿 remains cautious of Denosuke after all. No ordinary man could make the king laugh that much, so he suspects this was all part of Denosuke's scheme. In truth, though, Denosuke was trembling in fear the whole time, and now his legs are so weak that he can barely stand. With no choice but to lean on 𝐃𝐈𝐿 for support, the two make their way toward the exit. But as they are leaving, Alulu shows up along with all the thieves that were working for 𝐃𝐈𝐿. But it turns out that they aren't just thieves, they are 𝐃𝐈𝐿's children. The girls are glad to see that 𝐃𝐈𝐿 is safe, since they were sure the king would hurt him once the truth came out. But while he's glad to see them, he doesn't understand why the girls are here. Alulu explains that Denosuke had asked her to track down the girls and bring them here to meet 𝐃𝐈𝐿. Following the Kimitsu incident involving 𝐃𝐈𝐿, Denosuke decided to dig into his background a little. At first glance, he seemed like nothing more than a shady merchant, but as Denosuke looked deeper, he discovered that 𝐃𝐈𝐿 had taken in numerous war orphans and raised them as his own, someone who would do that couldn't be entirely bad. So Denosuke felt compelled to protect him. 𝐃𝐈𝐿 is astonished that Denosuke went to such lengths for him and his children, feeling deeply grateful. Later, just before Denosuke departs, he presents 𝐃𝐈𝐿 with a contract to sell the Rosmarins on behalf of the demon army. 𝐃𝐈𝐿 is stunned. Why would Denosuke entrust him with such an important contract after he had already deceived them once before? However, Denosuke assures him that he believes 𝐃𝐈𝐿 won't pull anything like that again. Besides, the demon army is already swamped with other matters, leaving them with little time to market the Rosmarins in far-off places, which is precisely why he wants 𝐃𝐈𝐿 to handle it. 𝐃𝐈𝐿 is moved by Denosuke's willingness to trust him despite what he did, so he vows to turn over a new leaf and ensure that Denosuke never regrets doing business with him. With the deal now settled, Denosuke prepares to leave, but just before he does, 𝐃𝐈𝐿 shares an interesting rumor he came across. It seems that the guilds within the demon army's territory have started becoming more active. Watch this next video on screen and subscribe to not miss next part.